Hello and welcome to Center Ice Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known throughout the hobby as Crease Collector. So starting things off, we just wanted to give a couple of quick shout-outs to listeners that we have. The first one being a really good hobby friend of both of ours, actually, that being Josh Packham. Just to explain a little bit, Josh has always kind of been a big proponent for me in helping me find some cards for my player collections, and that's really kind of taken center stage for me over the last few weeks, as Josh has actually himself found and then acquired two one-of-ones for my player collections in the last few weeks, with those being the Nicholas Hjalmarsson 2021 SP Game Used Green Auto 1-of-1 and the Jacob Slavin 2019-20 The Cup Upper Deck Printing Plate Booklet 1-of-1. So, obviously those are two really big cards that'll be heading my way at some point in the near future. And without Josh and his, willingness to help me out, there's no way that I would have even come across the cards, let alone acquired them. So just wanted to publicly recognize him for the huge help that he's been to me of late, and it certainly is appreciated. And Aaron, you wanted to give a shout out to another listener.
I did. Just another listener shout out here. A quick shout out to NJ Drew on Instagram, Big Devils Collector. I just wanted to give him a quick shout for his amazing Apple Podcast review that he just sent out. I'm just going to read the review quickly for you guys. He sent this in, and it reads, "Some of the best hockey card content out there. Love the show, guys. Perfect for long drives for work or having on in the background when sorting through cards. I listen primarily on YouTube, but borrowed my girlfriend's phone to let y'all know how great this show is. Always look forward to your guys' posts. They are super active on Instagram as well." Nice little 5-star review there. So I was talking to him the other day, and just he actually made a point to actually tell me that, yes, I'm going to steal my girlfriend's phone just to go and leave you guys a nice little review. So I just thought that was amazing. Just great dedication to the podcast. So thanks so much, Drew, on that amazing, amazing review. Love it.
That's super cool. Yeah, I mean,
It
like you
is.
said, dedication. You wanna share your thoughts with us that much that you steal your girlfriend's phone just to tell us. That's pretty awesome. So thank you to both of you guys. We appreciate that you guys listen, and yeah, glad that you like what we do. Turning to a little side segment, I was able to recently pick up a pretty big piece for my Derek Whitmore collection. As some of you guys may know, I think I've said it on the podcast before, I collect his jerseys as well, as his cards, of course. And one jersey that I had my eye on for about 7 years now at this point, which is kind of hard to believe it's even been that long. But back in the 2013-14 season, he was signed by the Washington Capitals, and he went to their training camp, of course. And during that season, the Capitals made up game jerseys for every player that was in training camp, whether they made the team, whether they played in any preseason games, whatever it might be. If you were at training camp, you got home and away team issue jerseys. So he ended up getting sent down to the Hershey Bears for the season, and then at the deadline got traded to the Adirondack Phantoms, actually. But anyway, he had the home and away jerseys, Capitals team issued jerseys. And at the time, McGray was the team's jersey dealer, and I think they still might be, actually. But so McGray had both the home and away Capitals jerseys for him for the longest time. And of course, right out of the gate, they were priced pretty high. And, being a guy that never played for the team, they weren't worn in any preseason games or anything. Obviously, they weren't sold. And, McGray had them for years and years and years, still at the high price. And it just seemed like, oh man, like I would love to get one or both of those. And it's probably just never going to happen because they're never going to drop the price to the point where it would really be worthwhile, given that it is a jersey that he never even wore. So it was always something on my radar that I wanted, but just never made sense to get. And then fast forward to, I guess earlier this month, I guess it would have been probably around the beginning of June. I was just doing my daily eBay searches, and the home red Capitals jersey just happened to be on eBay, and McGray was auctioning it off. And the starting bid was a pretty reasonable price. So I ended up kind of just waiting it out, see what would happen. And I think there were one or two other people that were bidding on it, but When it was all said and done, of course, I was able to get it. So I finally, after 7 years of waiting, have that red home jersey in my collection, which is super awesome. It's my first red jersey of his. I have pretty much every other color that he ever had a jersey in that color of. I've got red, orange, yellow, blue, black, pink, a pink
You're
specialty
looking
jersey.
around at your crazy hobby wall. Like for those who don't know, I'm not sure if you've ever shown a picture of it to anyone. You probably should. His whole office is literally wall to wall with jerseys, mostly game worn, I believe. And it just looks amazing. Like I'm looking at it now in the background and just looks so good. So yeah, it's a great kind of a mini memorabilia, like Hockey Hall of Fame like office you got there. Jealous.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a nice setup. So that Capitals jersey is the 16th jersey of his that I have. Not all of them are game worn. Most of them are, but there's a few that are just team or game issued. There's a couple training camp jerseys. Like I have a Sabres training camp jersey, the Capitals one now, and then I've got a couple more or less like specialty game issue jerseys, but then everything else is game worn. So there's still a few teams that I would love to get. I'd love to get an actual Hershey Bears jersey. I have his game issued Capitals Night Hershey Bears jersey. So once a year, the Bears wear Capitals jerseys for a game, and they would usually play it where the Capitals play. So I have his game issued jersey from that game. He ended up just being a healthy scratch that night, unfortunately, because of the AHL's veteran rules. He couldn't play every game. So unfortunately, he didn't play that game, but I still have the jersey from it anyway. So that's technically a Hershey Bears jersey, but it doesn't really feel like Hershey Bears jersey because it's a Washington Capitals jersey that just has a Hershey Bears logo patch on the shoulder. So I would love to get one of the chocolate brown jerseys for my collection. I don't even know if they're out there or not. Since he got traded at the deadline that year, they might have just repurposed them for Chris Newberry, who is the guy that they acquired in exchange for him. But yeah, so definitely happy to have gotten that jersey for my collection. And that kind of wraps it up for the introductory type of stuff for the episode. So transitioning to the main part of the episode, Aaron, since this topic was kind of your idea, do you want to introduce that main discussion topic for everybody?
Sure do. No, this is a topic that I've wanted to cover for a while, and I think it's really interesting to boot. This episode's mainly going to cover those hobby busts that we've seen over the years. And like, I know you guys are wondering, like, what is kind of a hobby bust? And it kind of involves kind of two different kind of players. It's those players that, for whatever reason, they have a super hyped up, maybe major junior year, or they're coming up out of the minor leagues and they're just the next Gretzky kind of thing. And for whatever reason, they never really get on track at all, like maybe injury problems or they just don't play well, and they're done pretty quickly. Other players are kind of prospected to have a really good career, and they kick around here and there, and they definitely make the NHL, and they definitely have a decent career, but never obtain that kind of status that they were, quote unquote, destined to when they were, in their rookie season. So I just wanted to cover this topic because it's something we see so much in the hobby. People, especially right now, we see it more so in other sports like baseball, where prospecting is huge and people buy, hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of cards, even thousands, before a guy's even played a game. Where in hockey, it's more just that hype for the initial young gun kind of thing. And then the SBA and the cup rookies once they are released, obviously. So we see this a lot in the hobby by and large. Not as much craziness in hockey, but if you've been a collector for a long time, you've definitely seen that initial drive towards a player's rookie cards and then kind of nothing after that. So it's just a kind of a fun topic. And I think we're going to cover some names that you guys have not heard or thought about in a very long time. And while we cover these players, we're just going to kind of talk about what caused their value to drop so much and highlight what values some cards had at their peak and where they're kind of at now. So some of them might definitely shock you. And I'm going to kind of cover, it's no surprise, but I'm going to kind of cover the goalies here, and Eric's going to cover the skaters. So that's what we're going to kind of go through right now in a bit. And I'm going to start off with some goalies, and it's probably going to shock you. So we're going to kind of rip the Band-Aid off here with a guy by the name of Rick DiPietro. So I mean, yeah, once you think of Rick DiPietro, you think of that monster contract. But I mean, even before that, he was kind of a notable guy anyway. He was drafted in the year 2000, number one overall. And that obviously backfired hard and did not live up to that draft position. Had a pretty solid career in terms of, I guess, years played. He should have got a lot more time in the NHL, obviously, but injuries and all that stuff, and he just didn't play well. But a fairly decent career, and like I would definitely call it a success to stick in the NHL as long as he did, but definitely not anywhere near his potential. One of his titanium rookies, it's kind of hard to go back this far, but one of his titanium rookies that are in the 2000-2001 series sold for over $200 US in 2005. That's the only data that we have available, and I'm sure many sold for even more than that, close closer to the early 2000s. But yeah, over $200 US for that kind of card in 2005 is still a lot of money. And I mean, for those wondering, as far as the contract goes, DiPietro is still being paid $1.5 million per year until 2029. So that is unbelievable. It's definitely not that bad. A little bit more of a recent name for you guys listening. Next name is Kari Lettinen. And I know Eric collects 2003-04s, so I know that he's been a fan of him through collecting him and his cards through his massive master set that he's going for. But also, I think he's been a fan of the player over the years, and I know that he's had his eye on a couple of his cards. So he can probably speak to this a little bit more than I can. But as far as any notable cards, he's a 304 Parkhurst jersey rookie autograph out of 100. Around 2005, it sold for $385, $400 US. And now it's about, I saw some examples of it being a $50 card. So not too bad considering. I mean, definitely nowhere near the peak, but I mean, a $50 card's not bad at all either. I'm not sure if that's because there's a lot of set collectors or it's just kind of like a really nostalgic set. I mean, I know when I think of that set, like it's just really, really, it's kind of like my childhood right there. So definitely not a bad card if you have it kicking around. But I mean, if you're the one of the guys that paid over $400 for it, definitely not winning that round. That's for sure.
Yeah, so Kari Lettinen, like you said, definitely a player I really liked early in his career. Growing up in the Chicago area, he played a couple years for the Chicago Wolves. So he was honestly one of my first kind of favorite players, so to speak. So I loved watching him with the Wolves. They were really good at the time, and he was, just at the beginning of his career, and he played extremely well for them those few years. And yeah, I mean, I loved him, and I fondly remember, his first rookie cards coming out and trying to get them. And what's kind of interesting with him is he didn't debut with the Thrashers until fairly late in that 03-04 season. So he made the cutoff date, but because he debuted like just before that cutoff date, he didn't get a lot of
Right.
rookie cards. So
I noticed that.
compared to some of the bigger names like a Marc-Andre Fleury from that rookie year, Fleury has like way more cards than Lettinen does, and as a result, that kind of factored into Lettinen's value a little bit, is there just wasn't as many cards out there of him to be going after. So the cards that were made for him during 03-04 were extremely desirable, and as a result were very valuable. And I remember in those first couple years that Lettinen stuff was pretty much just as valuable, if not even more so in some cases, than Fleury's rookie cards.
It's
You know,
crazy.
you look at that Parkhurst rookie, you look at the BAP Ultimate Memorabilia Auto rookie out of 100. Those two in particular were, those are probably the easiest two to compare side by side, and those were probably on level playing fields for the first year or two, I would say. So, pretty crazy to look back at that now because, like you said, you can get Lettinen stuff for pennies on the dollar compared to what it used to be. And, Fleury's actually gone the opposite way. He's gone up even more since his rookie year at this point. So pretty cool to look back there. And yeah, I mean, I definitely collected his stuff fairly aggressively. I mean, as aggressively as I could as a kid at that point. So, had some nice stuff, and I have all of his rookie cards already. So don't have to worry about picking up any of those for my master collection at this point, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, I remember, even it took a long time to find one of those Parkhurst rookie auto jerseys, and I forget what I paid for it, maybe $50 or something, $75 or something. But I've been trying to get one for I don't even know how many years. I mean, probably 6, 7, 8 years, and you couldn't find them because it was such a desirable card. Really his probably his best rookie card. So yeah, an interesting one there for sure. And some of his other notable rookie cards would be his Premier Collection rookie. That was just a base rookie, I think, out of 399, but that sold for pretty good money. I think that would go for 50, 60, 70, $80 US at the time. His rookie update rookie, which was part of the redemption set, that was numbered out of 199. Those were probably at least $100 at the time. And now the Premier Collection you can get for probably $2, $3, $4, $5. And the rookie update is a little bit better. It's probably a $10, $20 card still, but yeah, that's definitely an interesting one. And then going back to DPS really quickly, while you're talking about that, I actually looked it up and I found one that sold last October for, get ready for this, $2.30.
Come on. Come on. Like I was just trying to find, like we're going through a bunch of values here. So I kind of just skimmed over DiPietro a little bit, knowing that obviously he would be like kind of like the number one bust. I was reading like a quick article about him actually, and just like he was renowned as the biggest bust in NHL history. So like I kind of glossed over like knowing that his cards wouldn't be as high as they were, but seeing one go for $2, one of those rookies is just ridiculous. And it's good to hear from you about Kari Lehtinen actually, because when we first started talking back in the day, like I think it was on the Clues and Char forums actually, like you ended up asking me, I think it was one of our first conversations, and you were asking me about like, hey, you collect goalies, do you have any Kari Lehtinen? Because I knew you had like a small collection of his, and we're looking for some key cards of his. I didn't have any to give you, but I've always known you as like the kind of the Kari Lehtinen expert, even though you don't like maybe not actively collect him. It's kind of like in the back of my mind, I'm like, this guy knows about Kari Lehtinen. I'm not sure if that's like, a thing to brag about, but about Kari Lehtinen.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah. So as soon as like I put him on my list, I'm like, I'm going to talk about him, but like Eric can definitely give a more, detailed answer, because it's funny how you bring up like Marc-Andre Fleury. As soon as you bring up like 0304, people automatically think Marc-Andre Fleury, like at least for me anyway. And I was seeing kind of the Canadian explosion of Marc-Andre Fleury back in 2003-04. And you on the American end were seeing the explosion of Kari Lehtinen. And so years later, I'm like, I didn't appreciate, Lehtinen at that time. Like I knew he was a good goalie, like on the ice, but as far as the hobby, I didn't appreciate what his stuff really went for or why that would be. And it's cool seeing like all these years later, your perception about why that was, and like while the whole Fleury craze was going on. So definitely a really cool time in the hobby. So, and definitely a great breakdown of his cards. Next up on the list, you're probably going to hear me say this a bunch of times, but a fellow Leafs legend, Jonathan Bernier. For those Leaf fans watching, a quick little skim of his prices here. His Cup RPA back in 2008, great design that year, went for over $300 US. And honestly, I would feel that it probably went for more than that. The tool we're using to find the values just doesn't include prices from Canada. So they're only US-based sales. So I'm pretty sure a lot of these even went higher than we're reporting. But just to give you kind of like a range of what we're looking for, Bernier went for over 300 US for that Cup RPA in 2008. And I saw one now right before we jumped on. One sold for $22 Canadian in April of 2021. So, I mean, no disrespect to Jonathan Bernier. I think he was a great goalie, still is, playing for obviously Detroit. And, he had a stint in Colorado as well. Like, I think he's a very talented goalie, had a very successful career and was huge with LA, like coming up with them. And obviously after a successful junior campaign and in Toronto, like we were happy to get him. And I think he serviced us well from when he was a Leaf. But yeah, obviously I think anyone who comes to Toronto has that ability to kind of, as far as the hobby goes, kind of change their fate. But unfortunately, like Bernier, if you kind of get run out of town and, and you waste your prime years in a Leaf uniform with no success, I think that's through no fault of its own, but I think that's kind of a death to your cards. as far as, that was the last opportunity to gain some value on it. And also it kind of speaks to a shift we're seeing now. Back then, when he was with the Leafs, traditionally in hockey, if you switch teams, that would be the end of any kind of value with your rookie cards. It doesn't matter if you did have success. If you had a different jersey on during your rookie card, it still wouldn't translate to any, increase in value. But we're seeing kind of a shift now where people are going back to their rookie cards and saying, no, it doesn't matter the uniform. I'm still going to, drum up value on this card. I still want it. Whereas back in the day for Bernier, that wasn't the case. Even if he did have some initial success with the Leafs, you wouldn't really see that with his young gun or something like that. So, we're seeing a shift in the hobby right now. But again, like some of these names and prices we're going to talk to you about didn't really happen then. So you might think that might seem kind of low back in his rookie year. But that's just kind of how the prices were then versus if Bernier were to make his debut now in 2021, I would think his cup RPA would go for a lot more than 300. So just to kind of, a little note there as we go through the names. And another one of Eric's favorites here, a Chicago guy, for better or for worse, Antti Niemi, cup winner with the Blackhawks. Eric, I'm not sure if that's a happy smile or a sad smile. He won you guys a cup, so I think that's a happy smile. But Antti Niemi, his RPA from the cup came out in 2010, and Ross here, of course, that clean design. And get this is probably going to be some of the wildest pricing we see probably on this podcast. In 2012, his RPA, I believe it was a 7-color RPA from the cup, sold for $1,136 US in 2012. I know, shake your head, I know. And they're a pretty steady card, to be honest. Even the regular ones were going for 200 plus. So if you hit this in your break back in 2010, it's a solid pull. I'm not sure what that 2012 one was about, but back in 2010, it was a solid $200 card. And now, after I looked it up, I've seen some examples of it being a $30, $40 card for his cup RPA right now. If you get some of his KHL cards, they sell for good money right now for those crazy collectors, but not so much as NHL stuff. Initial success in the NHL, won a cup, but after that, he stuck around. A good career, a solid career. I would love to have a career like Niemi did, but didn't translate to hobby success. And of course, the trades over the years, switching teams did not help. So crazy price.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Antti Niemi, that's a name that brings a lot of memories back. Mostly good. Obviously, he kind of came out of nowhere and backstopped the Hawks to that Stanley Cup in 2010. One thing that I almost remember him the most for, and that one reason why I kind of like him is, people might not remember, but during that off season, both Antti Niemi and Nicholas Hjalmarsson were restricted free agents for the Blackhawks. And the San Jose Sharks decided to kind of force the Blackhawks' hand, so to speak, and
that's mean.
Kind of essentially pry one of them away and let the Hawks choose which that was going to be. And obviously the Blackhawks made the right decision in keeping Hjalmarsson and letting Niemi go. So obviously when you say the name Antti Niemi, the first thing that comes to mind is the 2010 Cup. But then right after that as well, he's also partially the reason why Hjalmarsson was in Chicago for as long as he was. So just an interesting little side note there.
I did not know that, actually. That's just a little fun fact that I had no idea. Kind of similar to this next name, coming out of nowhere, young goalie, winning a cup. Next name on the list is Matt Murray. I know he still has time. Eric was telling me before the podcast, he still has time to turn around, and I get that. But unfortunately, he is making our list of hobby busts. He did win a cup, and he did win another cup. But, this is one of those things where he had hobby success. Overall, he's probably going to have some pretty good career success. 2 cups is nothing to sneeze at. That's a successful NHL career, if you ask me. But as far as the hobby and having that longevity, as far as your value is concerned, Matt Murray ain't it. I'm sorry. I hate to say I told you so, but I remember seeing some of his cards when they first came out, And as a goalie fan, obviously you watch the goalies and you see his success and you want to see that translate into cards. And Matt Murray, like, I'm biased because I love Fleury so much, and seeing them choose Matt Murray, I'm sitting there thinking now, like, yeah, he has success, but this guy ain't it. Just something about him, like, he ain't it. So collectors, of course, jumped on the bandwagon. I can only imagine if that happened now, if that happened in 2021, what the prices would be. But nevertheless, they were what they were in 2017, and pretty impressive. A BGS 9 Cup RPA sold for over $900 US in 2017. I saw another one for about $1,000, which is ridiculous. And if you pulled that raw after the release, it's about a $250 to $300 card, so a pretty good hit if you hit it at that time. And right now, it's still pretty decent. I mean, obviously from those Cup wins and, Pittsburgh fans being, big collectors and stuff like that, it goes for an average of $100 to $150 now. Again, pretty decent. So, I mean, like, I would still consider it a hobby bust because of where he came from and where his value is at now. And the lowest example I saw just recently was $56 for that very same Cup RPA in 2021. So, I mean, a fall from grace for Matt Murray. And again, he can still turn it around. And in today's hobby, if you have success, that will translate to your older cards, even wearing a different team's jersey. So we could see a spike in those cards. I mean, the Sens are a solid team, and they have some young people there. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens during his career. But as of right now, for me, he's a hobby bust. That's going to go have a pretty good career, but he just isn't going to do it for me.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And even just looking at his young guns, I think at the kind of his peak around those Cup wins, I think his young gun, which to note was part of the SP Authentic update set.
Well, I actually hit, like, that reminds me, I actually hit his update Young Gun in my SBA break back in the day. And I sold that for a pretty penny as soon as I pulled it. And it was a great sale for me. I think that was my only notable hit. It was awesome. Like, I kind of cashed in on that, was not going to play the waiting game with his Young Gun, pulled it, sold it, and kind of made out like a bandit. So it was a good day for me that day.
There you go. Yeah, I think at the peak those were like 75 or $100, and now you can get them for 15, 20, $25. So yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up well. He definitely peaked in his first couple years, and even though he still has probably a good amount of time still ahead of him, probably will never get back to that level again. So kind of turning to some skaters that are similar to these goalies that we just went through, guys that had, fairly long and successful careers, but just could never really live up to the hype of their rookie year and the card values that they had. So the first one that came to my mind, and, I think part of this is also, because of the Toronto factor, and also at the time I collected Zach Bogosian. So Zach Bogosian had some cards with this player, and that being Luke Shen. And of course, he was a very high draft pick for Toronto, so that's going to help your value a lot.
Sure
And
was.
he was a promising prospect, and people had very high hopes for him. And as a result, his stuff had a lot of value. Going back to his Cup RPA out of 99, that card was a $250 to $300 card around release, and now you can get that same card for about $50. One of those guys that just never was able to kind of live up to that hype, especially in Toronto. I think the pressure kind of got to him a little bit, and then they actually were able to sell high on him, so to speak, somehow, and get James Van Riemsdyk from Philadelphia for him. So that actually kind of worked out nicely for them in that regard. But yeah, definitely a guy that had a ton of value as a rookie that just, kind of fell off a cliff after that. And then these ones are kind of interesting to me in the sense that they have both had pretty decent careers, one more so than the other. And you'll see what I mean when I say the names, but both were extremely hyped up during their rookie years and went for huge money at the time. And now they've dropped quite a bit and are kind of around the same value now as each other, and those being Matt Duchene and Alex Galchenyuk, guys that both had Cup RPAs out of 99 as rookies. Duchene, depending on the patch, which is interesting because the Avalanche have a pretty wide variety of patch selection. You can get fairly boring patches, you can get really nice patches with the Avalanche. So depending on the patch, that Cup RPA out of 99 would sell anywhere from $500 to $1,000 US around release. And now that's about a $200 card, depending on the patch, even though there's not quite as much variation on the price nowadays, regardless of the patch. Whereas early on, obviously, there was a big range based on the quality of the patch. And then for Galchenyuk, obviously, he had the Montreal factor going for him. And his Cup RPA out of 99 sold anywhere from around 700 to 1,000 US right around release. And he had a couple of good years with Montreal in the early going of his career, and just has never really been able to find a home and replicate that success ever since. Seems like he, did okay with Minnesota, but we'll see. I mean, like I said, he'll never get back to that level again. And now that Cup RPA out of 99 is a $100 to a $150 card. So fairly similar guys there. And another guy that I would actually kind of throw in with that group, not quite to the same degree. His stuff was never as valuable as those guys, but has had a similar, decrease in value percentage wise. That being Kyle Turris, who of course started with the Phoenix Coyotes at the time. His Cup RPA out of 99 sold for around $250 depending on the patch. And now that's about a $50 card. So just a pretty steep drop off there, even though Turris has had a pretty good career. I remember, back 2017, with the Senators, he was a really, really nice piece for them. And his stuff actually did go up pretty high around then. And, since then it's just dropped right back off again. So another guy kind of similar to Duchesne and Galchenyuk that's had a fairly lengthy and decent career, but just, never really lived up to that high draft pick hype.
Do you think for those cards, like I noticed you notice the value of these cards right now being for those two guys you first mentioned being, $150 to $200 cards for their Cup RPAs. Do you think something has to do with those cards specifically being that they are, Cup RPAs out of 99 and they do have that sort of brand equity behind them, being from the Cup, being a 99 from the Cup? People might still want to go back and upgrade their patches or, go for that, a set that year. Or, a guy this year might start collecting his favorite players from the Habs over the years, like rookie cards, and going after just, the Cup singles. So do you think those cards having that 99 print run from the Cup still translates to not really a player value because those have already tanked, but being more like you're paying more for what this card is than what the player is right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely factors into the value, and we'll kind of, I know you wanted to talk about that point later on with a guy that we'll mention toward the end, but yes, I think that absolutely factors in for sure. You look at Kyle Turris. I mean, if he was a 249 RPA,
Right.
that would be a $5 or $10 card.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
just the fact that it's a Cup 99 warrants that price point, and we'll get into more Cup 99s later that are less than $50. But generally speaking, I mean, yeah, if you get a Cup 99, it's worth something. It's not just going to be a junk card that you throw in a box and no one will give you $10 for. I mean, you'll be able to get something for it. Obviously, a lot of these players that do have those Cup 99s will never reach the value that they were at release. But yes, to your point, I do think that is definitely a driving factor for some of the value that's still there. Guys like Duchesne and even to an extent Galchenyuk, there's enough collectors of those players where I think the demand is still kind of there to an extent.
Plus, his recent move to Toronto with Galchenyuk, I think might have, I'm not sure what sales you looked at or when they were, but could potentially, kept those prices a little bit level. Like I could see some Toronto collectors running out and picking up his RPA if they could, but who knows if they had any say in the recent pricing of those cards, but you never know.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, definitely something to note there for sure. And then moving on to two more other skaters who, were relative hobby busts that still had somewhat decent careers. I would not say that either of these guys had, the success that those first four guys did that I mentioned, but they still, stuck around for a little while and had some individual success on the ice. And both of these guys are actually European players. So that also can kind of factor into the value of cards to an extent. This first one of the two is interesting to me because he was a rookie in 0304 And I remember, as I've said before, 0304 was my first full year in the hobby. So I remember this guy's cards coming out and there being a lot of demand for them, and them being more valuable than the majority of other players in that rookie class. I mean, at the time, he was probably a top 5, maybe, if not definitely top 10 player in that rookie class. That being Nikolai Zherdev of then the Columbus Blue Jackets. And he was another guy that debuted a little bit later on. So his stuff kind of came in that second wave of products. And, he was in Pacific, would always throw in, the kind of like the update rookies from previously released sets in some of the later on sets. And so you'd get, whatever rookie card from an early product in one of their later products. And same with Upper Deck products too. I know his SP Game Used rookie out of 600 was I think that was in a card that you could get in rookie update and so on. But anyway, I was looking up one of his more notable cards that I do have in my master collection already, and that being the Premier Collection RPA out of 199, which we've mentioned it before on the show, but you have to remember anything pre, 0506, the cup wasn't a thing. So for those guys that were rookies in 2002-03 and 2003-04, their Premier Collection RPAs, if they had them, that was the equivalent of their cup RPA. So if you look at Zherdev's Premier Collection RPA, he was not one of the super short prints. Guys like Fleury and Stahl and those guys were numbered out of 99. Zherdev was in the second tier, which was numbered out of 199. And at the time, again, kind of depends on the patch a little bit, though many of the copies that I've seen do have pretty decent patches, but his cards sold for around $250 US at release. And the copy that I have in my master collection is a pretty nice 4-color patch. I got that one last year for $20. So
$20, $20. Like that's like, and a 4-color is a 4-color, and for $20, I mean, especially a guy chasing the set, I mean, that's just, you can't get better than that. You're chasing the set, you want the card. It's obviously way after his rookie year, and just swiping it up for $20. Man, good steal. I mean, I think these hobby busts that we're talking about, I think there's a winner and loser depending on when you buy. So yeah, I'm glad you were on the positive end of that one.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. I was happy with that pickup for sure. I mean, honestly, just kind of based on what the card sells for, it was a fair price, give or take $5-10 on the value, depending on the patch. But what I paid was a pretty fair price for it. But yeah, I mean, when you compare it to what it sold for back in the day, it's pretty remarkable. And then another guy kind of in that same territory that I would throw in the mix. This is not a notable name, compared to many of the others that we'll talk about, so I won't go in depth with him at all. But another guy that had kind of the Toronto factor going for him early on that then just dropped off a cliff was Yuri Talusti. His cup RPA out of 99 sold for around 150 or $200 US around release, which is fairly low for a cup RPA out of 99. He was always kind of a lower end guy that just got in the 99 checklist, probably shouldn't have, but he did.
Yeah, I think I remember a lot of people, especially all the Leaf fans, like kind of complaining, like, why is this guy 99? Like he should be, in the higher tier so that people have a shot at affording his cards. But what can you do?
Yeah. So, I kind of think that Upper Deck probably just made him on 99 because, he's a Toronto first round pick. So it'll help the value and the demand of the card.
Right.
But yeah, so
it did.
Yeah, and it did. But, being a lower end guy, it didn't sell super well right out of the gate. And nowadays it's a $25 card, and that's purely just because it's a cup 99. So yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch on, I mean, we went a little bit in depth on some of those guys, but kind of briefly touch on some guys that had decent careers but still kind of fall in that bust category. And then transitioning into some skaters that are just straight up hobby busts. This is kind of a long list, so I won't go super in depth with most of them until we get to some of the bigger ones toward the end. But I figured I would start with the skater busts here because some of the goalie ones are pretty big, as you will find out at the end of the show. So just starting out, we'll just start off with 3 super obvious ones that when you guys hear the term hobby bust, these are 3 of the guys that you are immediately thinking of. First one we'll start with is Alex Daig, who, many would kind of consider to be, quote unquote, the first hobby bust. don't really have any notable card or sale prices for him, but I mean, just because of the hype
I
and
think,
everything, he
yeah,
just,
like he was kind of
yeah,
like a sign of the times, right? Like it's hard to really quantify, even if you have people quoting like what they paid versus what other cards were going for. The prices of his cards might not shock people like a cup RPA price, but I mean, still, like of that time being in the 90s, like that price point, like say if you pay $30 for a card, like that would be the equivalent of paying $500 for a cup RPA back then. It just like a different time period, and you can't really quantify it, or the values won't shock you. But he was kind of the first guy to be a hobby bust, in the 90s, where there was this card boom and values started to become a thing. And yeah, just like for me, like I think of his name when I think of a hobby bust. And I'm sure people in the 90s who grew up in that time period in the hobby, I think would know more than we would, or would have a couple other names to throw around. But for the 90s, yeah, it's him.
yeah, without a doubt. And it's kind of interesting. And this kind of goes along with the other two guys on this super obvious list. It's almost like their cards still have some value, almost just as a joke. Like people are like, oh,
I
yeah,
was going to say
I
like a
want,
comedic factor,
yeah, like people are just like, oh, yeah, that's funny. I want that card. And
but
then
it's
because
value.
of that, there's still some value there, which is kind of funny. But so the other two names on this list, again, they're obvious names, but Patrick Stefan for the Thrashers. And then, of course, the one that really comes to everybody's mind, nailed it, Nail Yakupov.
Nail Yakupov.
So,
Man, he was a bust, like a true bust. Fled to Russia. I think if he stayed, he could have had a decent career, but just, man, that's tough. I mean, I feel bad for all those Oilers fans. Man, that was a tough one.
yeah, I mean, at the time, he was in the 13-14 rookie card crop, which was the dual rookie class because of the shortened 2012-13 season. So, I mean, you had some massive names in that rookie crop. I mean, you had Barkov, Huberdeau, Nathan McKinnon, all those guys. Well, none of them were the big ones that everyone was going after. Everyone was going after Nail Yakupov. So, of course, his stuff just had massive value. You look at his Cup RPA out of 99, that was a $750, $800 card at the time. And now it's a tenth of that. You can get them for under $100 nowadays. And again, a lot of that is just because it's a Cup 99 and haha, it's Nail Yakupov. That's funny. I want that card because it's cool and it's funny. And that's why there's still value. So, especially looking at more modern times, Nail Yakupov is the name that comes to everybody's mind. Funny little side story with him. I was actually at the 2012 draft in Pittsburgh, and I think I've mentioned it on the show. We're pretty good family friends with Michel Goulet, who has been an NHL scout for a number of years at this point, and he's been in a few different organizations. I think he's with the Ducks now, but I could be wrong. At the time, he was with the Calgary Flames, and he was able to actually just get us draft tickets, so we didn't have to buy them or try to find them from a season ticket holder or something like that. We were able to just get a hold of him and say, hey, would you be able to get us a couple tickets? And sure, no problem. Meet me at the hotel that we're staying at. I'll meet you in the lobby, give you the tickets. There you go. So that's how it played out. We were waiting around in the lobby to meet up with Michelle, and it was the hotel that all of the teams and all of the players were staying at. So we're waiting in the lobby, and we're kind of just in the middle of the lobby looking around, waiting for him to come down. And then this guy just like runs into me, like just wasn't paying attention, was talking to somebody else, and just straight up runs into me. And I'm like, okay. And I turn around, and it's Nail Yakupov.
No
So
way.
I'm like, whoa, like
No way. That's awesome.
Nail Yakupov just hit me.
Pre-bus Nail Yakupov.
And that was the most physical play he ever made in his career. But
Oh, that's awesome.
but
I don't think you've told this story like on the podcast before. I
no,
think this is the first time I'm hearing it. That's awesome.
yeah, not a story I tell too often, but definitely a memorable one for sure. So neat little tie with Nail Yakupov there. And I don't even know if I have a single Nail Yakupov card outside of a base card, but
Yeah, I was gonna say like outside of a base. I mean, I know I don't, but
yeah,
I think like like it's interesting when you talk about Yakupov and just like the Oilers team at that time. Like there's a couple other players like Nugent Hopkins, Jordan Eberle, like guys like that who were just so hyped up with this Oilers crew and just just not getting it done. I mean, maybe Nuge might, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes up. But with Yakupov, man, he's just one of those guys that you have a more of a connection than him than I do. But it was it's fun hearing his name.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe one day I'll have to go out and get that Cup 99 for next to nothing, just for kicks. But
Just for fun.
and then kind of transitioning to some more fun ones, I would say, guys that were certainly busts, but they weren't names that you would necessarily immediately think of when you think of a hobby bust. So the first one, this is again kind of an older one that goes in that Patrick Stefan era. I don't know a ton about his value and how much demand there was for him, but I know that he was pretty hyped up at the time. That being Pavel Brendel. I know his cards were pretty desirable at the time, so had to have him on the list, even though I don't think either of us are super familiar with his cards during his rookie years and in that time period, but just wanted to put him on there. And then kind of moving into the late 2000s and then into the 2010s, the first one being Robbie Schremp, who everyone kind of knows is the YouTube sensation that just had absolutely filthy hands and could stick handle his way out of a phone booth. And because of that, he had some pretty good hobby values rookie. He was a Cup RPA out of 249, and that card was a $60, $70, $80 card at the time. Now you can get that for $5 or $10. Another guy who had pretty high draft stock, and that kind of fueled his value, even though the Russian factor and being in a small market was kind of working against him, was Nikita Filatov for the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think a lot of people really bought into the hype for him, and there were some pretty lofty comparisons for him, and it just never really worked out. He bounced around a little bit, could never really stick in Columbus, went to Ottawa, that didn't really work out either, and then went back to Russia. His Cup RPA out of 249, depending on the patch, sold for around $150, believe it or not. And nowadays you can get that card for $5 or $10. So
Nice.
huge.
Build a piece.
You easily could. But yeah, huge bust there. A guy that had loads of potential, loads of skill, just didn't work. One that a lot of people really liked as a rookie and early in his career, even going back to his days in the CHL, is Curtis Lazar. And being a center's prospect, that helped his value a little bit too. Was never really the most high end prospect, so to speak, but just his popularity factor really drove his value. And his Cup RPA out of 249 sold for $50 or $60 around release. And again, I mean, he's still kicking around in the NHL, but yeah, nowadays you can get his Cup RPA for $5. I pulled a really sweet card of his out of a case of Heroes and Prospects from 13-14 back in 2014. Yeah, that was a super sweet card. I actually think I still have that card.
Should have sold it.
I wanted to. at the time, it was a I forget the insert set. It was a dual jersey, one with a Edmonton Oil Kings jersey piece, and then one from the CHL Top Prospects game, gold version numbered out of 10. So it had pretty decent value at the time. I mean, it was probably a $20 card at the time, and now I'd probably be lucky to get $5 for it. But kind of interesting about that card, I don't know if the adhesive that Dr. Price was using around that time period just wasn't super effective, but the Oil Kings piece had a really nice seam, and the jersey material literally just like came out of the card. So like I pulled it out of the pack, and the actual jersey piece, not like the seam piping material, but the actual jersey material was literally just sticking out of the card, like at a 90-degree angle. And I was like, what the heck?
That's kind of cool. Like in terms of damage or a card being out of time, not really, but kind of cool.
So I was able to kind of work it back into the window and make it how it should have been. But just an interesting little story there. But another one that a guy that was really hyped up as a rookie, kind of similar to Luke Shen in a way, though he didn't have the Toronto factor going for him. This was just a guy that was a Canadian player and had super high draft stock, and as a result his hobby value was really high, given even kind of what he was at the time, and then obviously what he became, that being Griffin Reinhart for the New York Islanders. I mean, his stuff had crazy value at the time. I know, his cup RPA, which was still a 249, was selling for 75, 80, 100 bucks, depending on the patch. And, again, nowadays you can get that card for 5, 10 bucks all day. So, just a guy that had so much value, kind of both on and off the ice, really, because you look and they were able to trade him to the Edmonton Oilers for the pick that became Matt Barzal. So, yeah, I mean, definitely a guy that was a pretty big hobby bust and even just a hockey bust in general, but not one that you immediately think of when you think of hobby bust. As like we are saying, you think more of the guys like Nail Yakupov than you do Griffin Reinhart, but definitely a bust nonetheless. And then one last kind of fun one, a guy that had huge value and huge popularity during his rookie year. Lots of drama surrounding him when he was coming into the league, just because of how he kind of handled himself and the situation that he was in. That being Jimmy Vesey, who, basically said, screw you to the Nashville Predators. I don't want to play for you. I'm going to go play in New York instead.
It's very Eric Lindros of him.
Pretty much. Of course, the difference is Eric Lindros could do that, and Jimmy Vesey
he was
couldn't.
good.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, as a rookie, VC had huge value. He was a cup RPA at 99. That card, depending on the patch, would sell for around $500 US at release. Still has some value today, and I know he was with the Leafs for a little while, so that probably is still kind of helping his value to an extent. As well as that Cup 99 factor, still helping that value. Today, it's around $125. So definitely still has some decent value, but, a far cry from what it used to be. And then moving to more of the heavy hitters for the skaters. The first one, again, this guy goes back into that early 2010 Edmonton Oilers period, being Magnus Pajärvi, a guy that had huge offensive upside and, people thought would be an elite winger for the Oilers for, at least a decade. Just never really worked out. His stuff had huge value out of the gate. Back at the time, I was collecting the 2010-11 Panini Zenith set, and he was a super short print rookie out of 99 in that set, and that card was super valuable. But even looking at his cup RPA out of 249, that card was $100 all day. And now you can get that card for 10 bucks. So just an interesting name there for sure. I put him in the heavy hitter category just because of the hype that was around him. Not that he had just monstrous hobby value, but he definitely had pretty strong hobby value. But then, kind of getting into this next group of guys, these are really, kind of the heavy hitters in terms of the skaters. First one being Ville Leino, who, was part of that 2009-10 rookie crop, part of the Enroth rookie crop, as everyone refers to it as, of course.
Of course they do. Of course they do. It's like just stuff of legends, that rookie crop. I mean, the Big E. Like, what can I say?
That's right. Yeah, the Big E is actually Jonas Enroth, not Eric Lindros. But anyway, Leino's kind of an interesting one. He was actually a carryover rookie that year. So he debuted late in the 08-09 season with the Red Wings, started the 09-10 season with the Red Wings, and then got traded at the deadline to the Philadelphia Flyers. Well, then he goes on this just monstrous playoff run with the Flyers, like just crazy. I mean, I don't remember his exact stats, but I think he was around a point a game in the playoffs. And had the Flyers won the cup against the Blackhawks, which of course they didn't, he probably would have gotten the Conn Smythe. I mean, that's how good he was. It probably would have come down to him. Who was the other? I think Mike Richards had a pretty good postseason. It would have been one of those
He
two.
was good around then. He was really good. The Flyers around that time were beasts.
Yeah. So I mean, he just had a lights out playoff, and of course, that immediately translated into hobby value. And I mean, his cup RPA sold for hundreds after release because of that strong postseason. And even the cards of his that had come out earlier in the season, all that stuff immediately shot up overnight during the playoffs because of how well he was doing. And just looking at that cup RPA, like I said, sold for hundreds around that time. That's a $10 card nowadays. So he ended up shortly after going to Buffalo, and well, we all know what Buffalo does to you, so that didn't end too well. But yeah, definitely a guy that crashed super hard after having some early success in his career. Another one that I wanted to talk on, this one kind of hurts for me personally, but is also kind of good in a way. A guy that I liked a lot even before he set foot on NHL ice. I don't talk about a lot, but I am a big Wisconsin Badgers fan. And this guy was the captain of the Badgers, I know at least his senior year, if not earlier than that as well. But Blake Jeffrion, who came up with the Nashville Predators, he was a pretty hyped prospect, not only because he legitimately was a good prospect, but also because he was assuming that he was going to make the NHL. He would be the first fourth generation NHL player ever. His lineage was Howie Moran's and then Boom Boom Jeffrion, and then his father was Dan Jeffrion, who played for the Canadiens for a little while. Obviously, not as big of a name as the first two, but because of that, that lineage and that family history, his stuff just inherently had a lot of value. In addition to him legitimately being a good prospect as well, so he had some good value still with the Nashville Predators. And then come 2012, I think around the trade deadline, he got traded to the Montreal Canadiens, where all of his, his relatives had played. So
What a story.
then not only, do you get that, oh, he's the first ever fourth generation NHL player, but the first three generations all played for the Canadiens. So
It's
now
awesome.
he's a fourth generation player with the Canadiens. So that just immediately made his cards explode. I mean, I'm talking like tripled, quadrupled, literally overnight. And I, at that point, had gotten quite a few of his more decent cards because I really liked him. I had followed him for a couple years at that point and just loved him as a player. So I collected his stuff. Well, as soon as he gets traded to Montreal and his stuff goes up just to disgusting levels, I just said, I can't keep collecting this guy. Like, as much as I like him, it'd be stupid to keep this stuff and continue pursuing stuff because I can't afford to keep getting his stuff at this point. So I might as well just cash out. So
Yeah, like did you know, like from your experience in the hobby, like, okay, this is going to be like, yeah, his values are going high, but I got to sell out because eventually these values aren't sustainable and they're going to crash out.
I don't think I had that mentality. I think it was more just I can't afford to keep collecting this guy and I don't value these cards as much as what they're selling for right now. So I just said, you know what? Even though I don't really want to, I've just got to sell this stuff. I've got to take advantage of
Yeah.
this opportunity. And, it hurt to move that stuff because like I said, I loved him as a player, and I really liked those cards. And it was just kind of an unfortunate situation, but it was just too good to pass up. So I did it kind of begrudgingly, but I did. And that was that, whatever, move on. And then of course during the 2013 lockout, he's playing down in the AHL and had a really nasty career-ending injury, unfortunately. And that was that. I mean, as soon as that happened, his stuff just fell off a cliff. I mean, his stuff was basically worthless. So after that, very unfortunate, obviously, and because of that, like I said, with the values just basically being nothing, I was able to actually just go right back out and pick up a lot of the same cards, not the exact same copies, but the same cards that I had previously owned, and then add even more. It was probably maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, something like that. I actually was able to pick up his Young Gun High Gloss, numbered out of 10, for like $15 or something, which at the time, when he got traded to Montreal, I'm sure that card would have been easily $200-300 all day long. So even though I obviously wish he had gone on to have the career that he was destined to have, it just didn't work out. And I'm pretty sure he's still in the game to some extent. I know he was a scout for Columbus for a little while, but yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing nowadays. But yeah, unfortunate ending there for sure. Then transitioning to another Montreal Canadiens bust. This guy, just because he just kind of fizzled out, he was traded away from the Canadiens and then just never really panned out. A guy that had a huge hobby value during his rookie year, that being Guillaume Latendresse. I remember really liking Latendresse and not even really had a good reason. I just, oh, he's a hyped up guy for the Habs, so that's cool. So I had gotten a couple of his cards around then, nothing super valuable or anything, but just kind of cool cards. But yeah, I mean, his Cup RP out of 249 was a $200 card all day long around that time, and now it's a $10 or $20 card. So just how it goes. If you're hyped up in a market like Montreal or Toronto and it doesn't work out, look out because your stuff is going to plummet. So unfortunately, that was the case for him. I mean, he did have a fairly decent career. I mean, he stuck around for a little while. Ended up going to Minnesota, I know, for a few years and was okay there, but yeah, never really lived up to the hype that he had as a rookie. Another guy, this is kind of an interesting name because of the situation surrounding him when he was drafted, because at the time, everybody thought that this guy was going to get drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. He was kind of that hometown kid that, oh, it's a perfect fit. He'll be a Canadian for life. He'll have huge value. Everyone's going to love it. It'll be great. And then the Canadians go up to the podium to make their pick in the 2005 draft. And everyone's like, okay, they're going to take Gilbert Brulé. They're going to take Gilbert Brulé. They're going to take him. It's an obvious pick. And the Canadians go up and they draft some kid named Carey Price. Obviously, that worked out pretty well for
something. Who's that?
yeah. So
Carey who?
obviously
He's probably a scrub.
Yeah. It worked out pretty well for the Canadians, I would say. But
Decent.
and Gilbert Brulé ended up going 6th overall right after Price to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and still being a super hyped up prospect. He had some huge hobby value. I mean, you look at his 0506 Cup RPA out of 199. Out of the gate, that was a $400 or $500 card, depending on the patch. Nowadays,
nuts. I remember pulling one of his cards back in the day from like SBA or something.
Yeah,
or SB Game News or something. Ridiculous.
He was a big time prospect. I mean, people had high hopes for him, and he had that French Canadian factor in his favor for sure. That always kind of bodes well for player values, as we see this year, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah, so I mean, his stuff had huge value as a rookie, and as time went on, it just didn't work out for him, and he kind of fizzled out fairly quickly. And now that same Cup RPA can be had for $10, and that is purely because it's an 0506 Cup card. If it was any other year, you'd probably be able to get that for like $1 or $2. So definitely a big bust name there for sure. Next one, this is a guy that had literally immediate success right out of the gate. Score a hat trick in his NHL debut, that being Fabian Brunstrom for the Dallas Stars. Obviously, when you do something like that right out of the gate, that's going to give you some hobby value.
Your cards are going to just talk. So if you do that, it's just going to be to the moon.
So he had some huge hobby value right out of the gate. Can't think of any super great examples that early in the season because there just wasn't a lot of stuff of him that early on. If you look at some of his earlier rookie cards, like a Young Gun or a Black Diamond, rookie gems, or something like that, you probably would have seen some pretty strong value there. But then, as the season progressed, he just never really was able to sustain that success. And even by the time the Cup came out that year, he was an RPA out of 249. That card was only 50 or $60 at the time, which, honestly, that actually really surprised me when I was looking it up earlier today to do the research for it. I figured it'd be at least 100, but yeah, it was only 50 or 60
could have,
bucks.
I mean, like our data set doesn't have Canadian sales, which obviously with hockey cards and the Canadian factor of those collectors up here, it probably went for more. But I mean, yeah, like we do have some limited data to work with, but still, a decent amount.
Yeah. Still just surprised me a little bit just because I know he was a very desirable rookie in that crop, just because of what he had done in the first game of the season. But like I said, he wasn't able to sustain that really throughout the course of that season, and throughout the course of the season, his value kind of steadily dropped. Not a massive amount, but it dropped, to an extent. And now that same Cup RPA $5 card. So yeah, he was more kind of a guy that everyone thought was going to be a really big thing on the ice, and because of that had hobby value, and then it just didn't work out. Whereas a lot of these guys, it was, this is a hyped up prospect, so he has huge hobby value, and then never really panned out. It was kind of the opposite for Brunstrom, where he was a total unknown going into that season, and then just had this lightning in a bottle type of game in his debut, and just became the next big thing overnight. And then these last two, these are probably names that you guys haven't even thought of in at least 5-6 years, unless you're just obsessive about hobby busts and hockey busts, which if you are, cool. The first one is a name that I honestly even forgot until I was just looking at rookie cards from various years and was like, oh yeah, that guy existed. Yeah, he was huge and then was nothing. And I remember texting this guy's name to Aaron, and you were like, oh yeah, that guy. Like, whoa. This guy was a hugely hyped up prospect, very talented player, and then was traded, and it just never worked out. That being Cody Hodgson for the Vancouver Canucks. And like I said, huge hobby value out of the
There was a ton of collectors of this guy back in the day. I remember people always asking for Hodgkin just all the time. And yeah, he had some big value and just gone.
Yeah, yeah. He came up with the Brampton Battalion, I'm pretty sure, and playing in the GTA and kind of that area that gave him a lot of collectors. And then obviously Canucks fans are pretty crazy if we're going to be honest. So there were just some hardcore Canucks collectors that just went nuts after his stuff. So he had a ton of hobby value as a rookie in 11-12, and then he ended up getting traded during that rookie season to the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for Zach Kassian. And he still had a decent amount of hobby value after that. It probably took a year or two for his stuff to really kind of dip after it became evident that he was not going to live up to his billing as a top level prospect. But yeah, I mean, at the time, his Cup RPA out of 99, that was a $400 or $500 card all day long. And, now depending on the patch, you're looking at 30 or $40. So just a guy that no matter what the card was that year, it had value. And now it's basically impossible to even just give away his cards. So that's a definitely name that you guys probably haven't thought of in quite a few years. Definitely an interesting name there. And then my last one, and then I'll let Aaron go on his big goalie bust spiel. But the last one for me, this one hurts personally because I very much got caught up in this hype myself. I've mentioned that I went to the draft in Pittsburgh in 2012. That was actually the third draft that I'd been to. I went to the 2007 draft when the Blackhawks got Patrick Kane first overall, which was amazing. And then I went to the 2009 draft in Montreal, which was the John Tavares draft. And being in Montreal, of course, rabid fan base. And depending on what city the draft is in, it can either be really fun, just with how the crowd is kind of reacting to picks, or it can just be like, oh, whatever. Obviously, like being in Columbus for 07, like the fans didn't really care that much. It was kind of just like, oh, we're at an NHL event. This is cool. Whereas fans in Montreal care about every single pick. So it's just a lot more interesting. But, then of course, draft is in Montreal. So it gets to the first round pick for the Canadiens. And, everyone's just on pins and needles waiting to hear who the Canadiens pick. And then they make the pick. And of course, they play it up as, oh, this is a hometown kid. So, of course, the place goes nuts. They draft Louis LeBlanc. And this guy just had massive hobby value. I mean, it was crazy. He's a Montreal born and raised guy, drafted by the Canadiens in the first round at the draft held in Montreal. Huge hobby value. And
best name ever for a
yeah,
Montreal Canadian, LeBlanc.
true.
I mean, like just the name on a card alone is like $100.
Yeah, I know.
For a guy like that, a rookie card, LeBlanc.
Yeah.
Any Habs fan's gonna just pay through the nose for a LeBlanc card.
Yeah. So for me personally, being able to experience that moment of that, of the Bell Center just erupting when they drafted him, it was just a really cool moment. So I had that personal tie to him and was like, oh yeah, I remember that when that happened. It was super cool. I'm going to collect this guy. So I didn't super collect him, but I went after his stuff pretty decently. I mean, pretty strongly given, that I was in high school at the time. And I didn't have his Cup RPA out of 99 or anything, but I had some decent cards. I mean, I made a point to get the Cup draft board card. I love those cards. Those are such cool cards. But, again, that kind of just truly, encapsulated that moment that I remember in a card, because it's like, here's the draft board that they slid on the draft board when I was remembering that moment. Just a card I had to have. I still have it to this day. I still have a lot of those cards to this day, actually. But his stuff was just stupid expensive. His Cup RPA out of 99 kind of depending on the patch, was a $700, $800, $900 US card. And well, then, like we've said, if you are a hyped up prospect for Toronto or Montreal and it doesn't work out, look out below. And nowadays, you cannot, I mean, you would probably have to pay people to take Louis LeBlanc cards off your hands. His Cup RPA out of 99, even with a fairly decent patch nowadays, can be had for like $25. So
Ouch.
yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, it's not like I spent thousands of dollars on his stuff, but between buying and
Right.
trading, I probably had invested a few $100s into his stuff. And nowadays I'd probably be lucky to get like $50 for all that stuff. So kind of unfortunate, but one of those that, kind of just the memory of that, kind of fuels that desire for the cards. And I still have them all to this day. And it's just kind of one of those little side PC things where you just kind of laugh at it and say, oh, well, and just enjoy the cards for what they are. So that wraps up my skater bus, and I will let Aaron go into his goalie bus. I don't think I have too much to say about any of these goalies. So if you just want to take the ball and run with it, go for it.
Definitely. I mean, that list that you put together was great. I mean, me just scrolling through it before we started here was awesome. Just a bunch of memories seeing those guys. But yeah, to finish off my goalies, I'm going to get into a few others and then just kind of end off on my heavy hitters list. Just two right off the top here. A name maybe some of you guys haven't heard in a while, but Al Montoya. That was one for me where I was like, oh yeah, I remember Al. So, obviously being part of that 05-06 crop, his RP at a 199 sold for about a solid 75 to 100 US at release. And right now, I mean, I think it's mainly because of just nostalgia and the set collectors that still try and collect 05-06, or people upgrading, things like that. It still sells for a pretty decent $20 if you have one kicking around. So not a bad sale if you ever come across one randomly. But yeah, Al Montoya, just a tough break there. So, and another one that it's kind of funny you brought up Montreal, especially in that last list you just finished off with, because this next pick is one that I'm sure some Montreal fans are gonna groan about. Although I do wish the best for him, and I still think there is a little bit of hope for him to still do something in the NHL. And you'll know the name, and that is Zach Fucale. And I think I got caught up in a little bit myself, not too much, but I mean, obviously his work with the CHL and Team Canada obviously just speaks for itself. His resume coming into the NHL was just ridiculous. People were just saying he's going to be the next Carey Price. That couldn't have been farther from the truth. I mean, although Carey Price did have some down years, yeah, he was coming off a really big year then in 2015-ish, and Fucale was going to be the next guy to kind of come in there, get mentored by Price, and just be the next kind of guy in his footsteps. And just for whatever reason, just could not translate that. People think it was what kind of led to it was also just kind of a lack of opportunity being behind a guy like Price, and they signed some guys too. So whatever the reason was not able to have any NHL impact at all. And just we talked about Cup RPs for a while, but I'm going to kind of switch it up. I found a sale from 2016, and of course his young guns were in the 2015-16 rookie class, and a BGS 9 in 2016 sold for $350 US, which is quite impressive. Probably more today if the whole grading scene was like it was today back then. But yeah, good solid $350 card. And I mean, obviously he doesn't have the same pull like it used to. He's not a rookie anymore. So in 2021, a BGS 9.5, so a better graded card, sold for just $10 in 2021. So obviously, in Canadian dollars, that's over $400 down to 10. So obviously, yeah, I know it's pretty bad. I mean, like I loved Fucale, like when he was coming up, he was a great goalie. I still think he has a lot of talent. I just think it was a lack of opportunity, to be honest. He wasn't given a fair shot to either make it or break it. And I know his junior numbers have been just okay since then. So I mean, he still is with, I believe, the Capitals organization right now. So I mean, there's still time for him, I guess. He's still young, but I'm hoping he gets it going and gets a fair shot. But yeah, as of right now, the value just isn't there. If he were to have any sort of even flash in the pan success, I think his young guns would skyrocket. Just being in a Canadiens jersey and just being a goalie, I think people kind of jump on the bandwagon with goalies a lot. I think there still is time, but maybe not. I don't know. Just the
Yeah.
value just isn't there. Like I don't know. I mean, like I'm biased because I did want a couple of his cards. I got them for pretty cheap. I have his Young Guns. I have his Premier RPA, which are great cards. When Premier made the return back in 2015, so a cool card I just picked up for very cheap. But yeah, it's just going to be probably one I hold forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Those two names, just briefly interesting with Montoya, at the time, he was expected to be the next Rangers goaltending great. Well, then comes this random Swedish dude out of nowhere named Henrik
Same
Lundqvist.
draft too,
And
same rookie class, I believe. Yeah, like the
yeah,
0506. Yeah, same rookie class. Kind of came out of nowhere and stole his thunder.
so yeah, Lundqvist just took the ball and ran with it, and that was kind of it for Montoya in New York. So never really worked out for him. I don't even think he played a game for the Rangers. I think he ended up getting traded to Phoenix and debuted with the Coyotes. But just a little side note there, and then kind of interesting with Fucali, he spent a year or two with the Fort Wayne Comets in the
Did
ECHL, which is just 45 minutes up the road from me. And there was a card show pre-COVID that I went to. I think it was like January of 2020, so just before COVID. And mind you, I'm in Indiana. Okay, this is basketball country, and there's still a lot of football and baseball. There's no hockey. No one cares about hockey here. And at that show, I think there were maybe two tables that actually had like legitimate hockey cards to be looking through. And then I would say maybe another five tables or so, if they had hockey cards, they were Zach Fucali cards because he was the starting goalie for the Fort Wayne Comets. So it was just kind of funny. Like everyone here has Zach Fucali cards, but
they love him?
no one like can get anything for them. It's just like, oh yeah, he's our goalie now, and he's got a ton of cards, so we'll collect his cards. So
Maybe they thought like it was kind of like basketball, like maybe they did a quick little read up on him, saw that he had some success potential, and oh wow, he's playing for our team. Like we're gonna kind of baseball prospect it and collect these cards, even though he's playing in the minor leagues, and hope for the best. But who knows?
maybe, yeah, but I mean, it was funny because having my understanding of the hobby and the awareness of kind of what he is, it's like, oh yeah, you've got his young gun, but you want $15 for it just because he plays for the ECHL team here. Well,
Doesn't work
I hope you
that way for
enjoy.
hockey.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy the card because it's not going to be purchased. But so if any listeners out there want Zach Fucali cards, hit me up because whenever I go to a card show in Fort Wayne ever again, which honestly I might not ever again because like I said, there was really no hockey to be finding. But
There's too much for Cali there.
exactly, if you want Fucali stuff, let me know. I know where to find it. So just a little side note there. But anyway, Aaron, onto your heavy hitting goalie bus.
Yeah, no, for sure. So this list is causing me a lot of pain, both physically and mentally, just to read it. I love these guys. Well, maybe not all of them, but I mean, to me, they're just goalies that were just super hyped up, and for whatever reason, just didn't work out. So I'm gonna start. I'm just deciding if I'm gonna go in this order that I have them in. I'm gonna start out a little bit backwards. So my first heavy hitter list is again a Maple Leaf, a theme that we're seeing here, unfortunately. Justin Pogge. So he was supposed to be like the next guy. And if you were in Leafland at that time, which I unfortunately was and still am, Justin Pogge was like the man. He was like the guy that was going to be the guy to take the Leafs to the cup. Like he was, like I looked up his stats before we came on the show here. And he played like 7 games for the Leafs and won 1 game. Didn't matter. Even after that season, people were still hyping him up. Like, no, he's not ready. He'll come up eventually again. He never did. But just the way the Leaf fans were talking about him, like, he's not done yet. Like, he's fine. It's no big deal. He'll come up and we'll win a cup. It's no big deal. So before his debut, it was hyped up like crazy. During, it was like, oh, this is amazing. He's finally up with the team. And then even afterwards, just still, what if, there's still this hype around this guy, like maybe he might become something. So, just all across the board. Like those are Leafs fans. It doesn't matter what happens, there's still going to be that what if, maybe next year kind of thing. And that was Pogge, that kind of like Leaf attitude, all in a hyped up player. So yeah, Justin Pogge. I feel bad for the guy. I mean, he played good in juniors and was worthy of the pick, but I think he was rushed into the NHL, and it would have been nice to see him kind of develop. But hey, that is what it is. And he had a really decent hockey career. He kicked around the minor leagues for a bit, went to Europe, I believe played in Italy for a bit, and now he plays in Germany. So good for him, a nice hockey career. I think he played in the KHL also. So yeah, good hockey career in his own right, a career that we can all only dream of. But yeah, I think it was a little bit rushed. And yeah, the Leafs it cost a young career, I think. But anyway, his RPAs, it's kind of interesting when you look at his prices, because back in 0809, his Cup RPAs were regularly selling for about over $200, which is, pretty good for a 2008 card in the Cup, like pretty fair value if you were to hit that card. But funny enough, his highest ever sales for his Cup RPA are actually after he had already debuted and long after those cards came out. Like they were in 0809, these cards were released, and his highest sales were recorded in 2012. So kind of interesting. And I believe it was from a super collector, because I know there have been a lot of hardcore Pogge collectors over the years, whether fortunately or unfortunately. And his regulars were selling for $200, but the highest ever recorded Justin Pogge RPA was the jersey numbered 29 out of 99 that sold for $400 US. And the last print RPA, the 99 out of 99, sold the following day for $350 US in 2012. So crazy prices there, like just a collector that I kind of appreciated, like couldn't, let the dream die with Justin Pogge and just committed to their cards back in 0809 and also committed to their cards a couple years later in 2012. So I respect it. Those are big cards for any player collection, a last print and a jersey number, depending on who you are and who you collect. But I respect it. But definitely they've gone they've gone down since then. In 2020, one of Justin Pogge's Cup RPA sold for a measly $5. So pretty sad. But hey, if you want to start a collection now, this might be the time to do so. So yeah, Justin Pogge, I dubbed him the future on this little list we have here. So definitely was not the future. So it's unfortunate. And moving on to the next guy, I'm going to kind of do my list backwards because I think I have some fun names to end off with. The next name on the list is the Hamburglar, Andrew Hammond. And this guy, I remember him. He was so much of a flash in the pan that they weren't even planned. Like they had to kind of pre-plan his cards and get redemptions out very quickly and get the cards out to him ASAP. And they weren't back in time for these products because they were pretty much all redemptions, like all the autograph stuff. And so people were paying crazy prices. If you hit his redemption, you could sell it on eBay. And just by the time the cards were back from Hammond and sent out to these collectors, the value had just dropped off a cliff. Like for those who don't know or have forgotten who Andrew Hammond was, but he was a goalie for the Senators, and he miraculously went, it's quite incredible what he did towards the end of the 2015 season. He went 21-2 to help the Sens clinch a playoff spot in 2015. Like that is just an unbelievable record. Dubbed the Hamburglar, and some people might remember the fans throwing hamburgers on the ice and him picking them up. Like there's a sweet card of him actually holding a hamburger on the ice. It's such a fun card. Like I remember back in 2015, friends sending me a link, to that card because they thought it was so awesome and like, oh man, you got to get this one. Like this is, this guy's the future, and this card has a hamburger on it. Like how cool is that? So I kind of knew, like, I don't think he's gonna be the future, but his values are nuts. I remember seeing people pay crazy money for his redemptions, like I said. And once they came in, just unreal. Some of his Future Watch autograph patch redemptions out of 100 sold for over $100 US in 2015. Honestly, probably more than that because we don't have the Canadian factor here. But I saw that one sold for at auction in 2018. Again, this is a Future Watch autograph patch out of 100. In 2018, sold for $1.75. $1.75. And it's a nice looking card too. Like those cards were nice looking back then. Like that year was great. Yeah, so an SBA Future Watch autograph patch out of 100 sells for $1.75 after they used to sell for over 100. That to me is mind blowing. So yeah, just the Hamburglar, flash in the pan, and just it's a fun one. It's a fun one to look back on, but not if you were going all out for his cards, which I'm unfortunately a lot of collectors were. So yeah, Andrew Hammond. In case you haven't heard the name in a while, unbelievable. And now we're gonna go to my final two. I'm trying to decide who to announce first. They're both equally bad, but I'm gonna go with. You know what? I started with some pain. I'm gonna end with some pain. So I'm gonna go with for my second last hobby bust, Steve Mason. I mean, came up with the London Knights. This dude was a stud. Actually, fun fact about Steve Mason, he actually played house league back when he was a kid, like most kids do. But he made the jump from house league to AAA in like 1 year, after 1 year playing goalie. He was so good. He plays, yeah, his first year playing goalie in his life. Played 1 year. He was amazing in house league. And then he's like, I'm going to go make the AAA team, and made the AAA team. And obviously, in Ontario minor hockey, you make AAA. That is if you're good enough, path to the OHL. And so that's what Steve Mason did. And he was great with the London Knights, and obviously was drafted quite high with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And he was lights out. And we talked a lot about flashes and pans, or this guy was good, and maybe that first week or two or a month or whatever, and then just kind of fell off a cliff. Steve Mason was good from start to finish that first year. He was just consistent. He was great. Won the Calder, I believe. Just unbelievable. He actually pitched 10 shutouts during his rookie year, which is unbelievable. He was amazing. I remember going after his cards back in the day, and I couldn't actually afford them. So I remember kind of opting for a Sign of the Times from 2009, which I still have the card today. And I forget how much I paid for it, but definitely it's not worth anything near that today. Like I remember just wanting some Steve Mason cards, in high school so bad, and just he was the next. He was awesome. Like he was the guy. Like when it comes to young goalies in the NHL at that time, and wanted those big cards, couldn't afford them, so I had to kind of opt for that Sign of the Times. It's a nice looking card too. Him and his London Knights mask, but just a cool card, and just after that, just kind of died. I mean, he did have a good NHL career, to be fair. Played a lot of games, was a starter for a very long time, and then went to Philly as well. Ended off with the Jets, I believe. So like a good solid NHL career, but just nowhere near that Calder winning incredible season he had with Columbus back then. It was just an unbelievable season. And after that, just nowhere close. So as far as those Cup RPA fans out there, it was originally signed for over $400. And I've seen some sell for around $50 in 2021. He still has some decent hobby value if you can get a good card of him. Not necessarily a rookie card, like just a nice looking solid card of Steve Mason. Like there's some fans out there. So maybe not a complete bust in terms of the value, but he's no $1.75 Andrew Hammond. But some decent value, I guess, but nowhere close to that 400 USD. Like out of the gate, it was just unbelievable. And Steve Mason, a name that I'm not sure if people want to hear right now. If you were fans of him back in the day, it's kind of tough to watch. But I remember when he was, I believe he helped them make the playoffs that year, I think. And like I remember them facing off against Brodeur either in the playoffs or during the regular season. And Steve Mason was saying in an interview how much of a fan he was of Brodeur, like growing up, and how he had posters of Brodeur in his room, and then he kind of had to clarify, like, not in his bedroom right now, just when he was a kid. So I just thought that was a funny interview thing he did back then. So Steve Mason, a good guy coming up, and just could not duplicate that over the course of his career. So definitely for me, a big hobby bust. And finally, the most painful name I probably have to read on this, being a Leaf fan, you've heard a lot of Leaf fans like myself, unfortunately, complain about him. Similar to Justin Pogge, but he was, albeit a couple years later, but this guy was, again, we Leaf fans do this a lot. He was the guy that was going to take us to the Cup. Again, you hear that a lot with Leaf fans, and well, it's kind of a joke at this point. Like, we're serious about it. Like, we're just, as soon as we get a sniff of a good prospect, we're like, that guy's going to do it. that guy's going to be the guy that puts us over the edge. So fortunately, again, like many names on this list, not the case. But my final name on this list is Jonas, the monster, Gustafsson, the Swedish monster. What do you say about Jonas Gustafsson? I have in brackets here the pain in all capital letters, just pain, just so sad. I remember again, like getting caught up in his rookie hype. Again, he was so hyped up in Sweden and came over here as a free agent. A bunch of teams were bidding on him, and Toronto kind of won out. And as soon as his rookie cards started to come out, I was keeping a good eye on these. I remember spending my birthday money on his very first jersey autograph card that came out, which was his Upper Deck SPX jersey auto out of $4.99. So, pretty high print. But I remember being like, I want the first jersey autograph card. Like, that's just going to be the one on my list. And I paid about $60 for that card. I remember thinking like, that's just so much money to spend on a hockey card, especially in high school. And but that was the going rate for them. And I think I even got a decent deal at that point. And those cards eventually did go up even further to over $100. And now you can get it for basically nothing. The copy that I picked up for $60 back in the day, I kind of picked it up and kept it for the nostalgia. And I probably should pick up another one because it's just such a fun story with that card. But I actually gave it away for nothing 2 years ago. A guy was looking at completing some rookie card sets from the Leafs, I believe. And, he reached out to me about the Gustafsson. And I said, you know what? Just have it. Like, it's not even worth the paper it's printed on right now. So I just gave it away to him for free. So that was, $60 down to nothing. So kind of funny. Yeah, like I remember people going all in on his cards, like just craziness. I remember his dual shield, one of them at least, selling for probably close to $1,000 because he was so hyped up. Yeah, just obviously was kind of run out of town. Had a decent career. Like, he stuck around a little bit, with Boston, Detroit, Edmonton, but eventually did go back to Sweden, and he retired actually this year, or maybe last year. So yeah, he's retired now, but definitely a name that Leaf fans will know and love, Jonas Gustafsson. And that, for me, as much pain as it is, I guess it's kind of all over now. That pretty much does it for our hobby bust list. But for those wondering, for players playing right now, we did kind of formulate kind of a fun list of guys who are kind of on the verge of being a hobby bust, where, they've had similar stories to the guys above and are kind of in the process of kind of just fizzling out. And I'm just going to read some names here. Eric, if you want to comment on some of them, be my guest. But the first name here, we have Nolan Patrick, obviously, a Philly guy. Josh Hosang, Christian, I can't even pronounce that, Vesalainen, Alex Nylander, Casey Middlestat, Eli Tolvanen, and Eric put in brackets, had a decent year this year, though. I hope you're right. Adam Gaudette, and finally Owen Tippett. So guys who are somewhat recent, but are kind of in that soon-to-be hobby bust category if they aren't already ours. So I'm going to stop talking in a second, but we're going to kind of go over a couple names who are kind of on that heavy hitters list, where potentially in the future we might talk about them a couple years down the road and think, hey, remember that guy? And just hobby value is crazy right now. But maybe in a couple of years, could they be hobby bust in the future?
Interesting names on that list for sure. The one that we'll get to in a minute, but going back to those guys you just named, it's an interesting mix of players. I mean, Nolan Patrick, obviously second overall pick in 2017, has just had, a rough go of things in his career. I mean, he's had injury problems left and right, and it's not fair to him. I mean, he was a very hyped up prospect and really probably would have been a pretty good player, and just because of injuries just hasn't had the opportunity to achieve that potential. And I think he played a little bit this year, but that was the first. I mean, I don't even think he played at all last year, and then he had problems 2 years before that, and then his rookie year he played, but yeah, I mean, he's just had a rough go of it and just hasn't had a chance to really establish himself. So, it's been, what, 4 years, and at that point, it's kind of like, okay, is he ever going to put it together? I don't know. You hope he does. I mean, you hope he has
You
that
definitely
opportunity.
hope he does, and it's kind of funny, like when you read off his potential, and he was signed to an exclusive autograph deal too. So all that money kind of tied up with card companies involved, and I mean, I'm hoping he pulls it together, like you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. So, and then you kind of add in the fact of, to kind of go back to what I was talking about earlier, that 2017 draft was another draft I was at since it was in Chicago. So that draft kind of unfolded kind of as expected at the time. But if you go back, it was pretty bad with the first two picks being Nico Hischier, who not a bad player, just wasn't worthy of a first overall pick, and then Nolan Patrick, second overall. And then 3, 4, 5, you had Miro Heiskanen, Kale McCarr, Elias Pettersson. So when you got those names right after you too, that's not doing you any favors for your hobby value either. So yeah, just unfortunate with Nolan Patrick. Josh Ho-Sang, I mean, I don't think he'll ever make it. I mean, Lou Lamoriello just seems to hate his guts and doesn't want to do anything with him. So I think he's pretty much done. Christian Vesalainen went back to Russia the last couple of years, I think, and I think he was around this year, but yeah, time's kind of starting to run out on him. Alex Nylander's terrible. I'm sorry. He's on the Blackhawks now. He's awful. He will never be anywhere near as good as his draft stock was, and will never be as good as his brother is. So even though, I mean, could he pull it together? Yes, but I'm telling you now, he will not. He is a terrible, terrible excuse of a professional athlete.
Tell me how you really feel.
He's too busy posting pics on Instagram and
Right, living the
worried
life. Yeah.
worried about his fashion and all that, and needs to get in the gym and learn how to play defense. But that's not going to happen. So forget him.
Oof.
Casey Middlestat, I mean, he showed some flashes this year, so I mean, we'll see. Hopefully for Sabres fans, hopes, he can turn it around and become something, but I don't think anyone is wildly optimistic about that right now, but we'll see. Tolvanen, like you said, he was very much on the verge of being a bust, and then did have a fairly decent year this year. Being on the Predators, I was able to see him play a few times this year, being in the same division as the Hawks, and he definitely has taken some strides. So I think he can, kind of work himself off of this list. I think it'll still take another year or two for him to really get past that, because people were, entering this year, people were extremely low on him. I mean, he was a Cup 99, and yeah, I mean, he just had terrible hobby value entering this season, and then, like I said, was able to put together a fairly decent season, so that helped a little bit. But yeah, it's probably still going to take him actually putting together a few solid years and establishing himself as a legitimate NHL player to not be considered a bust, I would say. So that's just a name to kind of keep an eye on. Adam Gaudette, another guy that's on the Blackhawks now, he had pretty big hobby value with the Canucks as a rookie, and even, up until he was traded to the Hawks. He's just nothing special. I mean, he couldn't even stick in the Blackhawks lineup, and I'm sorry, but if you can't stick in the Blackhawks lineup, that's a problem. So yeah, I don't see it ending well for him. Owen Tippett is an interesting one. Elite goal scoring potential, but just hasn't put it together yet. So the clock is kind of ticking on him, and if he can't figure it out in the next year or maybe 2 years, then that might be it for him. But yeah, definitely all the talent in the world, just a matter of if he can put it together or not. But those are the guys that were on our verge of being a bust. But then we took a crack at kind of, taking some guesses at guys who could potentially be hobby busts in the future. And these first two are names that I will preface by saying, at the very least, I don't believe they will. I guess I can't speak for you, Aaron, but I do not believe
Me
that.
neither. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think these next two will be a hobby bus. I don't think so. But it's kind of fun to speculate and think, it's possible. Like, you just never know.
Yeah, what if? I mean, I think there at various points have been reason to be concerned with one of these players. The other one, I think people are just stupid. Sorry, not sorry, but the first name, so we'll just get it right out of the way. Again, these are two guys on our not likely to be a bust list, but we just wanted to put them out there because people are talking about it. First one is, of course, Alexis Lafreniere. Relax, people. He's a 19-year-old child that had not played a game in over a year. He had been playing against kids and then immediately gets thrown into the NHL in New York City. What did you expect for him to do?
In a COVID year too, in a weird kind of COVID year.
Exactly. So the people that are saying, oh, Lafreniere's a bust, he's a joke, he'll never be anything, you don't understand hockey. Like you literally don't understand hockey. Like stop. Like please stop. No one wants you as a fan of hockey. No one wants you as a card collector. I'm sorry. If you're listening to this and you feel like he's a bust, I'm sorry. You're not welcome here. We don't, forget it.
That's funny.
Lafreniere is not a bust. He's a 19-year-old kid. Be patient. Like, come on. Seriously, be better than that. And that's all we'll say about that. I'm sick of seeing it on Facebook nonstop all day long. It's ridiculous. Stop. Anyway.
Like, I honestly think he'll be fine. I mean, obviously, was his rookie season the season he would have wanted or fans would want? No. But even with Hischier, like similar story where people were writing him off and he kind of bounced back immediately. And you're seeing that value kind of come up on him to the level that we would expect. And obviously, he still has time to go with Hischier. So I think we haven't seen the last of him. As far as Lafreniere goes, I mean, similar boat. I think he's going to bounce back. Just a weird year. You can't really compare what he did in juniors to kind of expect that now, especially in such a weird year as this. And he's coming into a team where, like, through that weird draft, like, they're a pretty good team already. It's not like he's coming into a weak team where he can play those prime minutes and kind of build the team, like make the team his own kind of thing. He's coming into a good team, like a good prospect, young prospect coming into a good team. Like that's hard to do too. Like I would argue harder to do than just coming into a bad team. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So like, I don't think he's a bust. We put him on this list because it's possible, because obviously he was the first overall pick and didn't live up to that standard in the first year, stats wise. So that's why he is on this potential list, like just by stats alone. But as his career goes by, I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think he'll be fine. And I think, like, again, people should just kind of relax on that and see how it goes and not trying to write him off just yet.
And even with that too, I mean, he got better throughout the course of the season. He had a slow start.
Right, exactly.
But once he scored his first goal, the monkey was off his back and he was able to just play. So there was all that pressure building up for the first, whatever month or two of the season.
And that's tough.
That's going to wear on him. It does. And as soon as that goal was scored, you could tell immediately, like, okay, he'll be okay. Like, and you could see, his play improved the rest of the season. For all those people that care only about stats and stats determine everything, which obviously isn't true, his stats improved throughout the season. So, yeah, there's no reason to be calling him a bust. But anyway, I liked your comparison. I think you said Hischier, but I think you're meaning Jack Hughes.
Or no, yes, I did mean Jack Hughes. My bad.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very similar.
I got them confused.
Situation. I mean, Hughes had a pretty underwhelming rookie year, and then his sophomore season was pretty good.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, no, it was Jack Hughes. I got them mixed up. But yeah, I mean, exactly. So I think similar boat. I think we'll see a similar Jack Hughes like bounce back with Lafreniere. So I think if you're a Rangers fan, or if you're not a Rangers fan, but just a card collector and like collecting rookie cards and are invested in his cards, I think he'll be fine. I don't know if he'll hit that 400 rate that he was going for his young guns. I think that was a little, that Quebecois, factor behind it.
Yep.
And it was a weird year. Hockey was finally back. Just everyone kind of rushed to his young guns. And obviously with the COVID boom we saw in the hobby, I think a lot of that price was kind of tied up in varying factors. Like we mentioned in prior names of the show, those card numbers might feel a little bit low, but that was a different market then. And I think a lot of these guys, like we mentioned, like Bernier, for example, if they were coming out now, their initial values would be higher. It was just, the sign of the times back then. So anyway, we're just going to put the laughing anything to bed. He is on the list, but I don't think long term he'll be a hobby bust. I think he's too good for that. Another guy that I know Eric has skin in the game, and don't worry, but another guy here in this potential for hobby bust is unfortunately Carter Hart. He had a tough year this year, coming off his rookie year, which he was playing amazing. Got shoved into that role with the Philly starter, which is always tough in any market, but obviously in Philly, definitely did have a tough year for sure. I think he'll bounce back. We're seeing it now with Carey Price, different career, obviously, but a guy who's just truly bounced back after years of people saying he's done. Not that Carey Price is a bust, he's not, but a guy, just taking his team in the right direction. I think Carter Hart's definitely going to do that. He's still young, and he's still a great goalie if you watch him play. And Eric with his Ice 99, I think you don't have to worry about that. And you did pick it up very cheap, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, whether you sell it in the future or whether you sell it now when his value is kind of lower, I think you'll make out fine on that card. But I mean, yeah, that's definitely a good card to hold for sure.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough to get that one pretty cheap and get it graded shortly before the prices went way up. So, yeah, I mean, all in, I think I've only got I don't even know, probably not even $150 in on that card. And it's a quad 9.5 graded card. So, I mean, I'm certainly not going to lose money on that card, regardless of if he pans out or not. If he truly does not pan out and ends up busting out, I would get rid of the card before it hit rock bottom. But yeah, I'm not worried. We've seen many goalies, that have had great careers that had a rough year here and there. So I am not concerned about Carter Hart in the least. I mean, I would say that there is a higher likelihood that he could be a bust than Lafreniere, at least at this point.
Right. And goalies are tough. There's so much pressure, and especially in Philly, like we said, not that there's no pressure on in a New York market, but I mean, it's different. A goalie in Philly, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if I was putting a percentage on it, I would say the likelihood of Hart being a bust is maybe 10%. I don't think it's that likely that he'll be a bust. And Lafreniere, I mean, frankly, like we're saying, it's just too early. But even just based on the type of player that he is, even if he doesn't end up being, an all-star level elite scoring winger,
still very good.
He has enough tools that even if he isn't that high-end type of player, he can still be an effective player. If he adapted his game to be kind of more of that well-rounded physical type of winger, harder working winger, that can still chip in a little bit, there's still a place for that in the league. It's not like he's just going to be a total bust, that's a pure sniper that if he's not scoring in the NHL, he's worthless. He'll still play. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see any chance that Lafreniere is truly a bust. I mean, will he ever get up to a point where his young gun is worth $400 again? Probably not. But does that just mean you're a bust? No. So anyway, those were our two on the not likely to be a bust, but we just wanted to mention them because people have been talking about them. So then moving to two guys that we think it's at least somewhat realistic they could become a hobby bust. The guy that I listed, I think, is probably a little bit more likely than the one that Aaron said, but I think that Aaron's is an interesting name too. I'll start with mine just because it's not nearly as polarizing of a name. That being Clayton Keller for the Coyotes. I think really the biggest issue with him is just the fact that he's with the Coyotes. That's terrible for your hobby value. If he went anywhere else, he'd probably see an uptick in his value. And, of course, he's going to have to really start putting it together on the ice to really kind of get that hobby value back. And I think that he can do it. I think he's a very talented player capable of reaching that potential. But it's just a matter of doing it. And then also, unfortunately, just being with the Coyotes, like I said, is not good for your value. So could he end up being, just straight up a bust? I mean, maybe. But more likely than not, I would say he would kind of fit into that category of a hobby bust that still had a decent career. I could see him kind of being like that Kyle Turris, Alex Galchenyuk, Matt Duchene type of player, so still have some hobby value, but just not what he was as a rookie. So that's kind of my middle tier potential bust. Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, my pick is Brock Besser on the Canucks. I mean, a lot of Canucks fans won't like that I said that. I mean, he's had some injury problems, and I think for me, it's a lot of factors in this. I mean, the Canucks have really proven a couple of years ago it was kind of just Brock Besser, as the guy who's going to take them to that next level, and his cards exploded, like all those rookie cards. But now, I guess for the good of Canucks fans, this team has a bunch of young talent around them, with Hughes and Pedersen and things like that. And so, their kind of hobby values are going to a couple different players. What was once Besser's kind of team in a way is now these kinds of players. It happened quite quickly in just a few years, but and obviously with Besser's injury problems, like that doesn't help. And so I just think potentially, his ceiling was very quick. And I'm not saying he's going to have a bad career. I think he's going to stick around a long time and be successful. But I don't think his values are going to return to what they were and have that commanding value in that market, as opposed to like a Pedersen or something like that. So, I mean, I could be wrong, and that's fine if I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I mean, just from what I'm seeing, it just doesn't look like he's going to come back to those initial values and take this team forward, like just by himself, So yeah, like that was kind of my off the wall pick.
Yeah, definitely good rationale there. I mean, I think there's, it's way too early to consider either Keller or Besser to be a potential bust. But yeah, I mean, purely looking at his hobby value, will he ever get back to that value that he was as a rookie? Probably not. Probably just won't happen. So,
It's common with hockey in general. It's very hard to get back to those initial rookie values. Some players do it or even surpass it, but it's very hard. We've seen it over the years. As the hobby kind of evens out, we're seeing maybe that happens with some older players, but I mean, it's going to be hard with these, current guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting too with him. I mean, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but as you said, in 17-18 during his rookie season, he was the guy kind of on the Canucks. I mean, they had Bo Horvat, I guess, but he was
That's true.
kind of the future face of the franchise, so to speak. Whereas now he's really like third fiddle behind Pedersen and Hughes.
Which
So
isn't bad if you're a
no,
Canucks fan. But for the hobby perspective, and you kind of add in those injuries, and if you're not seen on TV, people aren't going to like you. So you add in that third fiddle thing plus injuries. It's like those hobby values, that money is going to go to other players.
Yep. So just an interesting one to keep an eye on. And then finishing up with kind of our quote unquote hot takes of the night,
Hot takes.
our bold predictions for guys that could become hobby busts in the future. And I have,
Even though they're really popular.
yes, the all of the guys that we are about to discuss are popular, more well-known players, younger players, we should obviously clarify, and guys that right now do have pretty good hobby value. Some more so than others, but all of them definitely do have good hobby value. I'll start with mine because I would say that these are definitely smaller hot takes than yours are. I have two, Aaron has three, so I'll start with my two. I'm going to start with Philip Zadina for the Detroit Red Wings. I'm just not sold on Zadina. I don't know why. During his draft year, I really liked him. I thought he was going to be an elite scorer, just kind of that dynamic offensive guy that, could really be a game breaker. And the fact that he dropped in the draft to sixth overall to the Wings, I mean, everyone was like floored that he fell that far because people thought he could go as high as second or third overall and at worst, like fourth or maybe fifth, but probably top three, if not top four. So, of course, then two, adding in the fact he went to the Red Wings. So that's naturally going to generally help your hobby value to some extent as well, even though the team isn't great, obviously. And that's putting it fairly gently, I would say. But yeah, I don't know what it is about Zadina. I just haven't been overly impressed with him since he's transitioned to the pro level. I think people kind of thought that the offense would be the thing that would immediately transition to the pro game for him and that it would be the other areas of the game that were, kind of lagging behind. But the offense really hasn't been there, or at the very least, the production hasn't really been there. So he's just a guy that hasn't really impressed me over the last couple of years that I would be concerned about. If I had invested good money in his cards, I would be second guessing that right now, and would definitely, have some legitimate questions about if I would be losing some significant money down the road. And the other one, I hate to say it because he's really the top prospect on my second favorite team, that being the Vegas Golden Knights, a guy that has always pretty much had huge hobby value, first ever draft pick for the Golden Knights, very hyped up, talented prospect during his draft year and over these last few years, that being Cody Glass. I think that he can still have a very solid career. I just don't know if it's in Vegas. I don't know if there's a place for him to really do what he needs to be doing. I mean, he's the kind of guy where he has to be in a top 6 role. And I don't know if he'll ever get that opportunity in Vegas. He's not a bottom 6 guy. They tried him as a third line center at points over the last couple of years, and it just didn't really work. I mean, he showed flashes of, his potential, but he's just not meant to be a third line kind of guy. He's got to be that top 6 guy, that you're relying on to produce offensively. And, with how strong and how deep Vegas is up front, everywhere really, but, especially up front, I just don't know that I see a spot for him. So I think if Cody Glass is really going to achieve that potential and that, kind of justify the hobby value that, he's had over the last year, he might almost have to be traded out of Vegas because, like I said, I just don't know if he'll get the opportunity to be a first line center or even a second line center with that team in the next year or two. Chandler Stevenson is not a first line center, but he's been a perfect fit on Vegas's first line. So I don't think they're getting rid of him anytime soon. And then on the second line, you've got William Karlsson, who, is kind of almost synonymous with Vegas nowadays. I mean, he's been one of the go-to guys from day one for that team. So I just don't see either of those guys leaving anytime soon. So where does that leave Glass? I don't know. And then, you factor in if he gets traded, then that's going to kind of hurt his hobby value unless he goes, to a Toronto, a Montreal, a New York,
and then has huge success.
Right. But, say he goes, to wherever, Columbus or, somewhere that needs a top 6 center. If he goes to Columbus, his hobby value is going to go down, even if he is in a better situation. So I would just be nervous for Cody Glass's long-term value at this point, just because he hasn't really gotten an opportunity, and I don't know if he'll get that opportunity. So that's just another name that I would keep an eye on, even though I like the player and I obviously love the Golden Knights. But yeah, I don't know. The clock is ticking on that one for sure. But those are my 2 hot takes. But now on to Aaron's red hot, flaming, boiling inferno takes.
Yeah, I mean, like as a Leaf fan, again, this I'm a sucker for punishment on this episode. But my hot take for a hobby bust is more so the other two, but Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. Toronto's big 3. Again, like more so in my opinion, Marner and Nylander. Just the money being thrown to these guys is unbelievable. And if they don't put it together as a team, and one of them or both of them for any trade or signing or like whatever, or they just get sick of Toronto and ask for a trade, those cards will definitely go down. Like I could see, if Marner goes to like Minnesota and maybe he plays good and has more room there, like obviously he's going to be that guy for that team, which is fine for his hockey career, I guess, but obviously for his cards, it just won't happen. These guys need to stay with Toronto for their values, and they need to win a cup for their values to be kind of justified. Matthews, not as much, because he's just a great player and he'll put up great numbers over the course of his career. And I think just overall be just great, even if he does eventually, like some people say he might go back to Arizona. If that does happen, I still think his career will finish up very, very well. And you could justify a higher price for his cards, even if he does eventually switch teams and doesn't have, a cup success in Toronto. Because honestly, like that's what it's all about. If you're sticking around with Toronto, you got to win a cup. But yeah, I mean, I could see people losing out on some serious money if they gamble on Austin Matthews and he just doesn't win a cup. Like that's just straight up. If he doesn't win a cup, you're going to lose money on his cards, because some people are just gambling on just that. Like when you're gambling on a Toronto player, it's because you want them to win the cup, like nothing else. I mean, yes, it's like that for any other team, of course. It's the main goal, but especially for Toronto. Like you're essentially paying the money for a cup one day. And if that doesn't happen, you're going to lose a lot of money, some more than others. But I think that, if any one of those guys leave Toronto, I don't think I see their value ever coming close to their Leaf Young Guns. I just don't think so. So, I mean, that's kind of my hot take. The team will stick together for the foreseeable future, obviously. So this is more of like a long pick. If one or even all three eventually end up leaving the Leafs, I don't think their hobby value will ever come back to where it was unless they win a cup and then disband later. Like that's the only way their value will ever stay consistent.
Yeah, I mean, you hear those
Like
names.
I know it's a rough take. Like I know that's a rough opinion to make. Like as a Leaf fan, I don't think they're gonna, at least not right now, leave. But there was so much talk, especially with Marner, right after they lost, that people just said like this is his last game as a Leaf, and Dubas has said otherwise. He said he's keeping the big three together. But I mean, you just never know what happens in a year if they lose out in the first round again. You just never know, and just the second one of those guys gets traded, or it all unravels, or their contracts are up and they decide like we're moving on to Toronto. That's it for their young guns.
Yeah, no, I mean it's shocking to hear those names, but then when you think about it, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially, I mean, you look at the prices that those cards are commanding, Young Guns and Future Watches and Cup RPAs and whatever it might be. It's crazy. I mean, I have 4 Matthews Young Guns that are all graded. I've got a Marner Young Guns. Those are cards that I got for not a whole lot of money
If you
comparatively.
got in at the ground floor, you're fine to hold them wherever they go and can still make money on it. Even if things do turn out the worst of the worst, you'd still make a pretty good bet on those cards because I think these players are going to have good careers. Like, let's be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. But people that are spending, top dollar on stuff today, I mean, it's hard to justify buying that kind of stuff right now because, like you said, those guys have to win a cup in Toronto if these cards will be worth this money long term. If they do not, they will not.
That's exactly like these prices right now that we're seeing are Stanley Cup prices. So I mean, if they don't hit it, that's it. So I mean, maybe this wasn't so much, a hot take after all. Like I can definitely see, like here in Leafland, Nylander was always kind of the scapegoat, as if someone is going to leave, it's going to be Nylander. But then those talks shifted to Marner right after his kind of contract issues, and then obviously not performing up to those levels in the playoffs. And people were kind of trying to run him out of town. It's good that he's staying for now. It's good that Dubas is sticking to his guns. I like that. I hope that they do find success, obviously, as a Leafs fan. But as a hockey card fan, I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, what if they don't? If they don't win a cup, there's a lot of people just knee deep in Marner cards, Nylander cards. Matthews are a little bit safer because, like I said, maybe they don't command that kind of price, but he's going to go down as one of the best players, I think, ever, as far as his goal scoring ability. And I think his cards, even if he does move, will have a certain type of value associated with it, and that's fair. But the other two, I mean, not as much.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it is a hot take, but it's a very rational one, I would think. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of fitting to end on that note. That's definitely a strong conversation to have there for sure. Aaron, is there anything else that you would want to add about this topic?
Not really, just a bunch of Leaf talk. We just talked about, as a Leafs fan, I'm kind of an expert at hobby busts. So, this podcast, while super entertaining, has saddened me. So now I'm going to go and buy a bunch of Enroth cards to make up for it. Thanks, Eric.
Well, hey, if you can find stuff that you need, more power to you.
Right?
Well, cool. I think that'll pretty much do it for episode 37. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Obviously this can be a topic that is either entertaining or extremely painful, depending on where you fall with some of these players or other players. Obviously these lists were not all encompassing. So if there's someone else that you have in mind that we didn't talk about, let us know, and we'll probably be like, oh yeah, how'd we forget that
tweet
guy?
us,
Yeah, we would love to hear those names because, at this point, if they're that big of a hobby bust, it's kind of funny. Like we talked about, Nail Yakupov, that's kind of
It's
funny,
hilarious.
unless you lost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this has been, like Aaron said, a topic that we've been wanting to cover for a while, and definitely more of an entertaining episode. I would say it's not really hobby news or anything like that. It's kind of just, oh, let's reflect on this and just kind of break it down a little bit. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Give us your thoughts if you want to hear more stuff like this. We have a couple other kind of similar
Similar.
topics that
Yeah,
we eventually will cover. I know you guys probably remember the hobby regrets
that
episode
was
we've
fun.
had. That was a lot of fun, even though it was really sad at the same time. We have, with that, always kind of wanted to do a hobby triumphs episode, so to speak. Things that have worked out really well for us in the hobby. So I'm sure we'll get around to doing that at some point. But just kind of ideas like that. We've got a couple ideas like that, that kind of fit into this general category. So if you like things like this, we'll have more episodes like this at some point. Obviously, they're not super regular episodes, but yeah, I mean, definitely, mixing it in there just to keep things interesting. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode, and we appreciate you listening as always. So with that, please be sure to follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Sunrise CarCast, and on Twitter at SunriseCC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Sunrise CarCast, keep collecting those hockey cards.